Welcome back to Education 240, and we're going to continue our lecture series on teaching and learning and effective teaching strategies in the classroom. Chapter 1 we discussed what is teaching. Chapter 2 we looked at learning and how students learn and what is important about learning and how to help students learn in an effective way to where it will impact their lives and they'll be able to apply that into their lives. Chapter 3, let's begin to discuss motivation. Motivation. This is the key that will allow the students to be teachable, that will allow the students to be able to learn the material that you have in your class. Understand that motivation affects a series of areas in the students' lives. Their personal well-being, their self-confidence, their academic success, all the way from their home life to their school life, and then back to their home life once again. Motivation affects every single thing that is around the student. Let's take a moment to look at what motivation affects in each area. Motivation will first and foremost affect the personal self-confidence of a student. We brought out Johnny and Joyce in the last scenario, so let's talk about a third student that was in the class that wasn't mentioned before, whose name was Larry. Larry sat in the back of the room, a very back seat in the very back row. Larry was always throwing paper wads. Larry was always kicking other students' desks or talking to other students or throwing his pencil or breaking his lead, disrupting class every time that Larry got a chance to. Most teachers simply looked at Larry and disciplined Larry and sent Larry to the office and got rid of him and just tried every way in the world they could to get Larry to cease from being in their class. And when the class was over, they were ready to get rid of Larry and send Larry to someone else and tell the other teacher to look out, here comes a troublemaker in their class. Larry was unmotivated. But the first thing we have to look at in motivation is understanding where students come from. Many times in students' home lives, motivation is not an acceptable factor. Many times students' parents are not supportive of that student in the classroom. Many times people, they go home, their students go home, and their brothers and sisters make fun of them the entire time for the classes that they're taking. Make fun of them for the failure that they have. These students are afraid to fail. They're afraid to try to succeed because failure is all they have ever known. When they come into the class, they're used to Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so constantly screaming at them, constantly calling their parents, constantly giving them detentions, constantly sending them home. This has affected their self-esteem to the point that Larry no longer wants to try in the classroom because Larry has become Larry the failure. This is what he goes by. This is what he understands. This is how he lives his life, simply because he was unmotivated. I've seen several Larrys in the classes that I've taught previously for other locations and other schools. I've been able to turn around Larrys back and make them into Joyces and make them into other students who are excited about learning. Simply because what no one in the classroom knew is that Larry would go home every single day, no food to eat, no clothes on his back, but Larry loved to work on his automobiles. You see, Larry had an old custom 76 truck sitting in his backyard. And Larry every day would go home and Larry would work on that truck and he would work on that truck and he would get so excited because he was able to work on the truck and fix the truck. Larry came into my class one day, passed on from another teacher. And upon giving a simple short survey, which we'll discuss in our very next chapter, I was able to understand that Larry loves vehicles. Larry didn't answer any other questions on the survey, except the ones that were dealing with vehicles. This told me that Larry was very interested in the fact that he could work on vehicles. There was something positive in Larry. There was something that was so positive in Larry that Larry was able to do something good. Larry was able to do something that no one else in the classroom was able to do. Larry knew things that no one else in the classroom was able to do. So in turn, I directed many of our mathematical computations or mathematical questions. At the time, I was teaching an Algebra 2 class for a high school. And every question and every topic that we came to, I always made just a little extra effort to apply that to some type of automobile and how to get extra horsepower, how to calculate the horsepower, how to calculate more torque into his 76 truck that he had sitting out that he was so proud of. Larry moved from the back of the room all the way to the front of the room. Larry began to answer questions that astounded and stunned the other students. The students would look at Larry and they would say, "How did you know that? How were you able to guess that? How did you know that was the right answer? I missed number 4. How did you get it right?" And it was simply because Larry knew that there was something that would motivate him that he was enjoying in the classroom. Larry went from an F in every class that he was taking, ready to drop out at the end of the year. Larry was a junior. He was ready to drop out. He went to a high B student. Larry was able to graduate and go on to college and begin to work in a community and technical college in the auto diesel department, simply because no one had ever taken the time to find out what motivated Larry. You see, motivation not only affects academics, but it also affects their personal lives, their self-security, their enjoyment, and their hobbies. Larry had luckily hung on to one thing that he enjoyed, and that was working on his automobile. If his automobile, his 76 truck in the backyard, if that would have been taken away, Larry would have had nothing to depend on. Larry would have had no motivation skills. Larry would have become a typical gap student, a dropout that would have never came back to school again. A failure of the system. In today's world, so many teachers are creating failures. We must understand that school is not always about the content that we teach, the textbooks that we work with, the chapters that we explore, the instruction that we give out. Sometimes we have to understand that a teacher has to have the passion, the love for students, the love for success, the love to see students succeed in their lives. By doing this, we're able to motivate. There are so many ways of motivating students. We can motivate intrinsically. We can motivate extrinsically. We can motivate by token reward systems. We can motivate by checkpoints and tally systems. But there are times that we have to look beyond those concrete physical items and reach down and see exactly what that student is interested in doing. Once we find this out, once we find their hobbies, once we find their motivating factor, then we can boost the student in the classroom and help them to succeed. I hope you've enjoyed this chapter on motivation, and I look forward to seeing you in chapter 4, which will be entitled Survey Applications.